it's Kathy Clement with Kathy by Design. I'm glad you could join me here today. It's my turn to do the Saturday Showcase feature over at the Frilly and Funky blog. That's frillyandfunky.blogspot.com. And Saturday Showcase is all about sharing a technique. And since I'm a card maker and I like to do layered cards, I thought it might be fun for me to do a process video for you of how I built this beautiful vintage style card with the Prima Lavender collection. This is a 5 1/4 by 7 1/4 card with a 1/2 inch spine, and it's all layered up with beautiful elements from the collection. I've got a double layer bow with seam binding ribbon, beautiful Prima flowers and little like berry picks, vintage buttons, this gorgeous butterfly from the Funky Junky Boutique that I just rubbed with chalk paint to kind of shabby it up, just to create a really great shabby chic masterpiece. So the inside of the card is also finished, and I'll just pull this down so that you can see. I've layered up more papers from the collection, and I took one of the ephemera cards. This is one of my favorite tricks. This is a 4 by 6 ephemera card. I scored it so that the width would be correct for the interior of the card, and then glued the flap underneath my designer paper. So here's a great little spot for you to write your own greeting. You can post a photo there, anything like that. And then I took this 3 by 4 ephemera card from the Lavender collection, inked the edges, cut a thumb hole with a circle punch, and glued it like a U shape to create a pocket for a tea bag, because I'm a tea drinker and I love my tea, and a lovely little place to write a note or, again, put a photo. This would also be a great place to put a gift card, and that turns your card into a gift. Here on the bottom, I've created a pocket, and I've got several tutorials on my YouTube channel where I show you how to build these pockets. And inside the pocket, I've got a little honey stick that I've decorated with just a scrap of paper that I cut into a banner shape. And then I created a little mini folio with another little place to write a note. You could put a gift card, you could put photos in here. Here's a little tuck spot, so that can sit behind there. And it just turns a card into a gift, which is a really lovely thing. I use some of my scraps to create this little banner, and then this beautiful lace is from the Funky Junky Boutique. I just love Shabby Chic. Ultraviolet is Pantone's color of the year for 2018, so this collection is certainly on trend. And if you'll just hang around, I'll be back in a moment and we will build this card together. Don't go away. Okay, so before we get started, I want to just show you what I use. This is Prima's new Lavender collection. I used the 4 by 6 ephemera cards. I used the 3 by 4 ephemera cards. These are just really beautiful, and I love them because they're great for layering, and you'll see how I use them when we put this card together. And then I used the A4 pad, which measures, this is really almost 8.5 by almost 12. So that's great. And then I used the 12 by 12 because I wanted to get some of this beautiful rose gold foiling. And then I used the ephemera bits, and I used these two flowers, Melanie, I don't know, and Jolene. So these two flower packs. I also used a Prima doily die, and I got these all at the Funky Junky Boutique. So to start with, you're going to build a 5 1/4 by 7 1/4 top fold card base with a 1/2 inch spine. And I do this, we've talked about this before, so I won't belabor it, but just cut from an 8.5 by 11 piece of cardstock two 5 1/4 by 7 1/4 rectangles, and then you're going to join them with a 1/2 inch overlap, and then cut them to be the size that you want. And I've distressed all the edges here. I've used the tonic distressing tool to distress all the edges lightly. I've already finished the inside of the card, and as you can see, the edges are distressed, and I've layered elements up, and we saw this when we did the walkthrough. So I'm going to take my little gift card wallet and honey stick out so that the paper will lie flat. I like to do the inside of my cards first because then everything stays clean. So the first thing you're going to do is cut a piece of lavender cardstock to measure 5 1/8 by 7 1/8 and distress the edges. And you can see I didn't overly distress, but just a little bit. And then from that 12 by 12 pack, you're going to cut a piece of 5 inch by 7 inch of this beautiful purple roses with the gold foil accents. And we're just going to glue these together. You can use a tape runner, you can use a glue stick, you can use whatever glue you're the most comfortable with. Adhesive is very much so a personal choice. I just happen to like liquid glue, so that's my choice. So you're just going to center this on this panel, and you'll see we kind of build the card here, then we load the card onto the base. I just find this is the easiest way to do it, and we're just going to go all the way around, kind of burnish that glue down so that it spreads out and really takes hold. And then the next thing you're going to do is cut, also from the 12 by 12, you're going to cut a piece of 3 1/4 by 5 of this pretty white filigree paper. Round the corners, I use a corner chomper and I use the 1/4 inch edge. And then you're going to ink this. I inked all my edges with Seedless Preserves Distress ink, so I won't say that again. And then I ran a piece of the washi tape along the bottom edge, and we're just going to, then I double matted it on both the lavender and then the deep plum cardstock, and we're just going to glue this down right here. So, and the next thing you're going to do is you're going to use the ledger paper from the, this is from the A4. Oh, I'm sorry, both of these are the A4. The only 12 by 12 I used was the foil. Otherwise I used the A4 because it's just less expensive. So this is 2 3/4 by 6. And again, round the corners, mat it on your cardstock, distress the edges. Then we're just going to add this. This is going to come up pretty high. Try to keep it straight. And I want to come over just a little bit. The reason I'm moving is that I want this margin on the right and on the left to be uniform. Then the next piece, now this was an ephemera card, a 4 by 6 ephemera card, and I trimmed it down and fussy cut around the edges. Then I took one of the 3 by 4 ephemera cards with this pretty stripe, and I also cut it down and put it behind. And as you can see, I've used, you could use foam tape. I like to use my shipping boxes to layer it up and add dimension. And then I cut one of the little tickets from the ephemera pack in half. This is a great tip. And glued half here and glued half here, so you get more bang for your buck. And then see where the name is right here? That's my guideline. That's where I want this one to go. So just add my glue. Can you see how I'm lining it up with the name up here, and then I'm lining up with the lavender on this side. So that is going to go there. Oh, and I trimmed this just for your references. It's still 4 inches wide, but I trimmed it so that it's about 4¼ inches tall. But you'll see when you have the ephemera card, just trim around the top edge and then trim there. Then I took this pretty butterfly pattern. I cut fishtails on the end. This is 2½ inches wide by 6 inches long. And again, cut the fishtails. If you don't know how to do this, it's very simple. Just fold it in half. Here, I'll show you on a piece of scrap paper. So just pretend this is this piece. I just kind of fold it like this. Then I take my scissor, and you're just going to cut from here to the corner. And you do that on each side. Very simple. So that's how I do that. I also backed this on this one side with a piece of my packing material because you've got a dip here. So this is going to line up right along the bottom edge of that ephemera card. And then just add your glue. And you know, I don't add a ton of glue. I don't think you have to go crazy with glue. A little bit goes a long way. So right about there, and I'm trying to keep it even on each side, and that's why I like liquid glue, because it gives me the opportunity to move things around a little bit. And then we're just going to press that down. So this next step that I did, I'll show you how this works. This was also a 4x6 ephemera card. So this is my 4x6, and I liked this, the best is yet to come. So I wanted to cut it out with a circle die, but a lot of times it won't come out even if you just put the die on there. So this is how I managed that. I tape my die to a piece of scrap paper. Then I run the scrap paper through my die cutting machine and leave the tape like a hinge on the top. Then you can position the item that you want to die cut. Can you see how I've done that? And this lets you see, this is exactly what you see is what you get. Then just place that die back down, seal it with tape, run it through your die cut machine, and this is what you'd end up with. So that's a simple little trick that works actually really, really well. So then I die cut my doily from the lavender paper. This is a card from the ephemera pack and a little ticket, and I just clipped that together with a Tim Holtz mini paper clip. I have a double layer of my dimensional here on the back because I really wanted this to pop up. So we're just going to put glue on this smaller one. It just seemed to work better. And this is going to go right here. And you just have to let that set up for a minute because it's kind of a mixed blessing with liquid glue. You can move it, but also sometimes it will move when you don't want it to move. So that takes care of that. And now this final step, well, it's a couple steps actually. I tied a triple layer bow, and then I topped it with a double layer bow from, this is elderberry seam binding ribbon. And let me just fuss this, it's got a little messed up here. So now what I'm going to do, after I fix there we go. And I just glued those on top. And then these are the little flowers from, let me find, yeah, these are the little flowers from the Milani. Anyway, I took some of those out of here. I wrapped the wire stem around these 3 little rosebuds and then put these little berry clusters behind and then glued that to the back of the bow. So I want to place this right here. Okay, so I'm going to put my glue right on the back, and then I'm just going to hold this in place for a second so that glue will set. And then while it's setting, I like to take my tails and kind of pull the tails to the center because I like the way that looks, but that's my personal preference. You certainly don't have to do it that way if you'd rather do it differently. So here's our bow. That should be set enough. And then you can just come in and kind of fluff it around. I call it fluffing the bow. And then this is one of the flowers from Jolene. This is from the Jolene pack of lavender flowers. And this one is going to go in the center, but a little bit toward the edge. Can you see how I don't have that like plopped right in the center? It's kind of lying on its side. It gives it a more natural look. So I'm going to put a little glue puddle here on my ribbon. I'm going to put this guy in there and kind of hold him in place. And then what I did was I took this rosebud and I just kind of squished it up together. I brushed it with some of my Seedless Preserves ink. And now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to stick this right down in there with that first one. And sometimes you have to add a little more glue. I usually do it faster because I'm not explaining to anybody what I'm doing. But that makes a very pretty little floral element on this card. And then the last thing I want to do is I've got these little vintage buttons that I've cut the hasps off of. They were shank buttons. And I'm just gonna, and you can get that tool at almost any like fabric store. It's just called a button tool and it just cuts. I'll show it to you in a second. I'm just going to put a dot of glue on the back of these little vintage buttons. And I like that. If you have a shank style button, say like this guy, this just goes over the shank and you squeeze and it cuts that off, and then you can glue it flat. So it's just a button tool. I got mine at Joann's. So I think this is good. I think I like this. I thought about adding this little butterfly kind of down here. This is one of the metal butterflies from the Funky Junky Boutique, and you know, I think I kind of like that right there. I think I like that. I think that it creates kind of a triangle, which is one of the things you want to do in your art. The eye likes to see triangular shapes. So I'm just going to hold that down there. And that is the front of our card. So you can see, not hard. Lots of layers. It looks overwhelming when you see it, but when you put it together, you realize that wasn't so bad. So now we're going to bring our card base back in. I'm going to double check, make sure this is the top. So I'm going to lay this face down, and I'm just going to add my glue to the back. And I do glue that down pretty well and take that little bit of whatever that is stuck there. And then you're just going to line it up so that you have an even margin all the way around, and so that it's nice and straight. Just hold it down. Press it down. Burnish it along the sides. It's a little harder than usual because I've got that, I shouldn't have put the button on the inside until after I had glued this down, but it's all right. We will make it work. All right. So there's our finished card. Isn't that beautiful? And then inside, all done. So thanks for joining me. I hope you enjoyed seeing me, how I layer a card and put a bow cluster together. I certainly enjoyed sharing it with you. I hope you have a fabulous weekend. Thanks for joining me, and I'm going to go get my craft on.